I want to tell you about a necklace. A small thing. Gold chain. A pendant the size of a thumbnail. A diamond so small you would miss it if the light was not exactly right. And 4 letters engraved on the back of the pendant in careful script. This necklace had been around Lily Mercer's throat for 3 years. She wore it every day. She never took it off. Not in the shower. Not when she slept. Not when she scrubbed the floors of the house where she worked on her hands and knees before anyone else was awake. She wore it because her mother had pressed it into her hands in a hospital room 3 years ago when Diana Mercer was dying and the morphine had taken most of her words but not all of them. The ones that were left, the last ones, were these: "The necklace is yours now. One day someone will recognize it. Let them." Lily had not understood that. She had been 24 and alone, and her mother was dying, and there was nothing to understand. There was only the weight of the necklace in her palm, and the weight of what was coming that she was not ready for. She had worn the necklace because it was the last thing her mother's hands had held. She had not known it was a key. She had not known what door it opened. Stay with me, because this story starts in a house in Westport, Connecticut, and it ends in a garden. And between those 2 places is one of the most heart-wrenching, jaw-dropping, completely true things I have ever had the privilege of telling. Subscribe right now if you are new here. Drop where you are watching from in the comments. This story is for every person who has ever been treated like they are less than they are. Like the room they are in could not possibly belong to them. The Harmon estate in Westport sat behind iron gates at the end of a private road. The house itself was 3 stories, 11 rooms, a chef's kitchen, a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20, a library on the 2nd floor that nobody used except Edward Sr., and only then on good days when the stroke allowed him to hold a book steadily. There was a garden at the back, English style, designed by someone with a professional reputation, and a pool that opened in May and closed in September. The house ran like a corporation, because Serena Harmon ran everything like a corporation. Serena, she was 43 years old. She had the particular kind of beauty that comes from effort sustained over a very long time, the kind that is not given but built, maintained the way you maintain infrastructure, with investment and vigilance and the refusal to let anything slip. She wore her dark hair pulled back always. Her clothes were selected the way arguments are selected, to win. Her voice was low and controlled, and she used it the way a scalpel is used, precisely to cut what needed cutting, in a way that left the smallest possible mark on the surface. She had married James Harmon, the CEO of Harmon Industries, 16 years ago. James was tall and good-looking and professionally successful and substantially less interesting than his title suggested. What nobody in Serena's current life except Serena herself knew was where she had come from. She had grown up in a small town in rural Pennsylvania. Her father had worked a line job at a packaging plant. Her mother had cleaned offices 3 nights a week. Serena had left at 18 on a scholarship and had not looked back in a way that looked forward every single second. She had built this life, this house, this position, this version of herself, brick by deliberate brick. And the sight of someone doing in her house what her mother used to do at night in office buildings, cleaning, serving, invisible, did something to Serena that she had never examined and would not examine now. It threatened something. Something about the distance she had traveled. So she did what people do with things that threaten them. She controlled them. Lily was a function, a category, the maid, not a person, never a person. That would cost too much. Lily had arrived at the Harmon house 2 years ago. She had come through a domestic staffing agency after 6 months of not knowing what to do with the grief or the silence or the apartment she could no longer afford without her mother's contribution. The job paid a modest salary. It included a room, small, at the back of the house, with a window that faced the east and got sun in the morning, and that was the room's best quality and possibly its only one. She had said yes the way people say yes to things when they are not yet able to imagine the alternatives. The first week, Serena had walked her through the house with the clipboard she always carried and the way of moving through rooms like she owned not just the furniture but the air. She had shown Lily the schedule, the supplies, the standards. There had been a phrase Serena used that first week that Lily would think about for 2 years. In this house, things are done correctly or they are done again. I do not repeat instructions. I expect you to retain them. She had said it the way you program a machine. Not unkindly exactly. Without warmth exactly. The way you speak to something that you need to function but do not need to understand. Drop a yes in the comments if you have ever been treated like a function rather than a person. Like the thing you do was all that you were. Because Lily lived inside that feeling every single day for 2 years. The days at the Harmon house had a specific texture. 5 a.m. Alarm. 5:15. Kitchen. Counters, stovetop, sink. Then the formal rooms. The dining room, the sitting room, the entryway with the marble floor that showed every footprint and had to be cleaned before anyone could leave a new set. Then the upstairs. The bedrooms. The bathrooms. The standards were not flexible. Lily had learned this in the first week and relearned it in every week after. The floors were not clean if there was a single streak. The laundry was not done if there was a single crease in something that should not have a crease. The table was not set correctly if any element was out of alignment. Serena found things. She had an eye for imperfection that was almost supernatural. The slight asymmetry of a throw pillow arrangement, the almost invisible watermark on a wine glass, the item in the pantry that was facing the wrong direction. She did not raise her voice when she found these things. She was worse than that. She used the particular tone of someone who had expected less and been proved right. She had called Lily Clara for 6 weeks. Before Lily had, very quietly, corrected her. My name is Lily, Mrs. Harmon. Serena had looked at her. Is it? And had gone back to her phone. 2 years of this. Lily, this floor isn't dry. Lily, the duvet isn't aligned with the pillow. Lily, when I leave a note, I expect it actioned before I come downstairs. Lily, that's not how we fold the napkins. Lily, are you listening to me or are you just standing there? And Lily had absorbed it the way she absorbed everything. Quietly, without letting it change her face. Because she had encountered him by accident in the second week. She had been taking fresh linen to the east wing and had come around the corner and there he was. In his wheelchair. By the window at the end of the corridor. Looking at the garden below. She had stopped. He had turned. He had looked at her with dark eyes that had not been dimmed by the stroke. Alert, observant, seeing. She said, Sorry, Mr. Harmon. I didn't mean to disturb you. He had looked at her for a moment. He said, You're not disturbing anything. This became a quiet thing. Not announced. Not planned. The corridor in the east wing in the early morning. He asked her once where she was from. Hartford, she told him. He had nodded slowly. Something moved in his face that she couldn't name. Another morning he had asked if she liked the garden. She had said yes, especially this time of year when the dahlias are still in. He had looked at the garden. He said Diana loved dahlias. She had not asked who Diana was. Some instinct. Some sense that the name was something private and that asking would be crossing into a space she had not been invited into. She had said, They're beautiful. He had nodded. But the name had stayed with her. Diana. Her mother's name. Now, I need you to understand what I am about to tell you, because sometimes stories set things up so carefully that when they arrive you feel them before you understand them. Lily's mother's name was Diana. Edward Sr. said Diana loved dahlias. Lily's mother loved dahlias. She had grown them on the fire escape of the apartment in Hartford every summer in pots that should have been too small but somehow produced every year the most extraordinary blooms. Lily did not know these things were connected. She did not know yet. But something in her, the part that cannot be reasoned with, the part that knows before it knows, something in her had paid attention. Stay with us, because October is coming. October, a Tuesday, Owen's 14th birthday. Serena had arranged a family dinner. The good china, the crystal, the table set for 8, and Edward Sr., who was coming to dinner. Lily had been given the instruction at 9 a.m. She had approximately 4 hours to reset the formal dining room, adjust the menu with the caterer, polish the silver, and ensure that Edward Sr.'s place was correctly configured for a wheelchair user. She did all of it, in 4 hours, perfectly, because this was what Lily did. The dinner began at 7. Lily served, the way she always served, without presence, without friction, moving between the kitchen and the dining room like water moves around objects. She was bringing the dessert plates to the table, her third pass of the evening, when it happened. She was beside Edward Sr.'s chair, setting the plate in front of him, when she leaned forward slightly and the necklace, which had shifted during the evening, slipped free of her collar. The pendant swung forward. She did not notice immediately. She set the plate. She straightened. And then she heard a sound she had no category for. Not a word. Not a cough. Something rawer than both. The sound of a person whose body has just done something before their mind gave permission. She looked. Edward Sr. was looking at her neck. At the necklace. His left hand, the functional one, was raised, trembling slightly, as if reaching for something he was not sure was real. His dark eyes, the eyes that had not been dimmed by the stroke, the eyes that saw, were wet. Lily went still. The table had gone quiet, the particular quiet of 8 people realizing simultaneously that something is happening that was not on the schedule. His lips moved. She watched them. He was working towards something. You could see the effort. The stroke had made this, the urgency of a word, the need to say something now before it was gone, enormously costly. But he paid the cost. He said, "Where?" He swallowed. He tried again. "Where did you?" He pointed. At the necklace. The whole table was watching now. Serena was watching now. Lily's hand went to the pendant without thinking. She held it in her fingers. She said, "My mother gave it to me, before she died." Edward Sr.'s face. I don't have words for what happened on Edward Sr.'s face in that moment. Something broke. Something that had been held for 32 years with the particular effort of someone who has decided to hold something forever. And underneath the breaking, something else rose. His left hand came forward. He touched the pendant. Just the edge of it. The way you touch something sacred. Then he looked at Lily's face. He looked at her for a long time. The table did not exist. The dinner did not exist. The 8 people watching did not exist. He said, "Your mother." Lily nodded, not knowing what she was confirming. He said, "Diana." The room stopped. Not the air. Not the sounds of the house around them. The room stopped, because Lily had not told him her mother's name. "Are you still breathing? I need you to be breathing, because what comes next is the part that changes everything. Stay with us. If you are not subscribed, please do it right now because this story is not over." Lily stood beside his wheelchair, and the pendant was in his hand, and her mother's name was in the air between them. She said, "How do you know that name?" He was gathering everything he had for what came next. You could see it. The way a person gathers themselves before they do something that cannot be undone. He said, "Diana Mercer, Hartford, 1992. Lily's legs felt uncertain beneath her. She said, "That was my mother." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were full of something she had no name for and would spend a long time trying to find a name for later. He said, "I gave her this necklace 3 decades ago, before I was married. We were together for almost 2 years. She chose to end it. She was proud. She didn't want to be the reason I stayed in something that was ending anyway. I looked for her for years. I found out 3 years ago that she had passed." He looked at the pendant in his hand. "I didn't know she was pregnant." The silence in the dining room was enormous. He looked at Lily, at her face, at her eyes, at the specific shape of her that he had been seeing for 2 years of corridor mornings without knowing why it pulled at something. He said, "You have her eyes, and you have my mother's jaw, my grandmother's." He looked at her. He said, "I think you may be my daughter." Nobody moved. The dinner table, 8 people. Not one of them moved. James Harmon sat at the head of the table with an expression that had not yet decided what it was. Serena sat at the other end with the wine glass in her hand that she had stopped raising somewhere around the word pregnant. And Lily was kneeling. She had gone to her knees beside his wheelchair without knowing when she had done it, so that she was at his level, so that when he looked at her he did not have to look up or look down. They were the same height. She looked at his face. She thought about a fire escape in Hartford. Dahlias in pots that should have been too small. A woman pressing a necklace into her daughter's hands. "The necklace is yours now. One day someone will recognize it. Let them." She said, "She didn't tell me anything about you. Not your name. Not anything." He nodded. "That was Diana," he said. "She did not cry in that room. She had spent 2 years learning not to cry in Harmon rooms. That habit was in her bones." She walked out of the dining room, through the kitchen, through the back door, into the garden. The October night, cold, clear. The garden in its autumn state. The dahlias finished now, the beds turning over, the trees beginning to let go. She sat on the stone bench near the back wall. She put her hands in her lap. She looked at the sky. She thought about Diana, about every question she had asked as a child and every silence that had answered her. She heard a sound. Wheels. On the stone path. She turned. Philip was guiding Edward Sr.'s wheelchair along the garden path. He said, "May I?" She nodded. Philip brought him to the bench and stood at a respectful distance. Edward Sr. looked at the garden. Lily looked at the garden. For a while neither of them said anything. Then he said, "I should have found her. I should have tried harder." Lily said nothing. He said, "I was a coward. The particular cowardice of someone who is comfortable, who has reasons not to look. I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it, for what you didn't have, for not knowing you existed, for this house, what it has been like in this house." He looked at her directly. "I see it," he said. "I see how she is. I'm going to use whatever power I have left, and I am going to use it for you." He looked at the garden. "The dahlias are finished," he said. She said, "Yes." He said, "Your mother loved them." She said, "I know." And in the space between those 2 sentences, in the space where 2 people discover they are connected by a woman who grew dahlias on a fire escape in Hartford, something became real that had been true all along. Serena came to her 3 days later. She came to the kitchen where Lily was making tea at 7 a.m. because Lily had not known what else to do with herself in the strange suspended days after the dinner. Serena stood in the doorway. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Serena came in. She sat at the kitchen table. She said, "I've been thinking about what to say to you. For 3 days." Lily poured 2 cups of tea. She set one in front of Serena without being asked. Old habit, or something past habit. Something that was just who she was. Serena looked at the tea. Then she said, "I knew where I came from, and I spent 20 years making sure it didn't show." She looked at her hands around the cup. "When you came here, I saw someone doing what my mother used to do at night in office buildings. And I made myself not see you, because seeing you meant remembering things I had decided were gone." The words landed in the kitchen and stayed there. Lily said, "I understand that." She said it quietly, not because it was fine, not because she was letting it go, but because she understood it. She said, "Understanding it doesn't mean it was acceptable." Serena said, "No, it wasn't." Lily said, "I know you won't do it again, because the person you were doing it to was someone you didn't want to see. And now you see me." Serena said, "Yes, and it was not forgiveness." Lily was not ready for forgiveness yet, but it was something. 2 women at a kitchen table on a cold October morning being honest with each other for the first time. That was something. She left in February. Not because anything went wrong, because she was ready. She found a small apartment in Westport itself. Small, with a good window and a south-facing balcony where she was going to grow dahlias when the season came. She came back in April. The first Sunday of April. Edward Sr. was in the garden. Philip had taken him out in the mild morning and parked his wheelchair on the stone path near the dahlia beds, which were just beginning, the first green pushing through the turned soil. She came through the garden gate with a brown paper bag of pastries from the bakery on Main Street. He heard the gate. He turned. He saw her. He said, "You're here." She said, "I said I would come back." She sat on the bench beside him. She gave him a pastry. She took one for herself. They sat in the April morning and looked at the dahlia beds beginning. The necklace was at her throat, visible, in the full morning light. DM always yours. H. 2 sets of initials. 2 people. Brought together by a woman who had loved them both in the specific ways they each needed, and had found a way to give them to each other even after she was gone. Edward Sr. said, "She would have liked this." Lily said, "She would have loved this." And then they both looked at the dahlias coming in. And it was quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind that does not need to be filled. And here is what I want to leave you with tonight. Lily Mercer went into that house as a maid. She left as a daughter. Not because the world decided to be fair to her. Not because justice arrived on a schedule. But because her mother, a woman who grew dahlias on a fire escape and raised her child alone and pressed a necklace into her hands in a hospital room and ran out of words before she ran out of love. Her mother had done one thing. One deliberate, quiet, precise thing. She had made sure that if Lily was ever in the right room, the room would know her. Is there something in your life right now? Something you are carrying that you do not fully understand yet? Something someone gave you, a lesson, a habit, a silence, a necklace, something you have been wearing without knowing what door it was made to open. I want you to consider that you might be closer to the room than you think. That the patience you have been practicing, the long patience, the quiet patience, the patience that looks like endurance from the outside, may be the exact shape of what was always required. Drop in the comments, what are you carrying right now that you are still waiting to understand? We want to hear from you. And if this story moved you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear that invisible does not mean unimportant.